Where can you absolutely not imagine God being at work? I mean it. Maybe it's a place, maybe it's a person. And I'm not asking you to answer with your head, because if you answer with your head, we're going to say, well, God's at work everywhere. We all know that. No, answer with your heart. In your heart of hearts, where is the absolute place that you just cannot imagine God being at work? The person, the community, the location. God can't possibly be at work there, right? Wrong. God is at work in those places, and that's what we're talking about this week. Nowhere or everywhere, that's how God works. If you think any different, then you are the worst. Hello all, I'm the Mad Pastor, and Christianity sucks. It's boring, it's irrelevant, it's out of date, but it doesn't have to be. Let me explain why. This week, we are talking about a story from the book of Genesis where Abraham literally lends his wife to another man because he's too afraid. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you kind of the outline of what I'm going to read, and then I'll read it. But if you want to skip any of this, feel free to use the navigations down below. So this is from Genesis chapter 20, and basically what we have here is Abraham and his wife Sarah enter into a land called Gerar, which we don't know. There's no real modern day equivalent. It's in the Negev, somewhere in that area. And there's this guy Abimelech. He's a king, and because Abraham is scared of what they'll do if they find out they're married, he insists that he and his wife pretend that they are brother and sister. Now, this turns out to not be pretend because they actually are brother and sister, and that's a revelation that happens only in this particular chapter, so that's weird. But anyway, God comes to Abimelech and says, don't touch her, she's married, and not only is she married, but she's married to my dude Abraham, and we have a covenant, so don't touch her. And so Abimelech goes back to Abraham and then confronts him and says, hey, why did you tell me that she was your sister when she was your wife? What's going on? And he's like, I was afraid. I thought you guys didn't care about God and that you would do bad, mean things to me if you knew that I was married to her. And instead, Abimelech says, no, here, take lots of property, take lots of wealth, and please, please, please ask your God to be nice to us. And then at the end, Abraham prays to God, and we find out that they've been cursed by God with barrenness. Basically, all of the wombs have been shut, is what they say. And so there's this weird kind of constantly, oh yeah, by the way, retroactive kind of retconning story structure, which is very, very strange. But in the end, Abraham prays to God, Abimelech gets blessed, their whole place gets cured, and Abraham learns an important lesson about believing. So, if you want to skip me reading the scripture, go ahead, use the navigation stuff. But for those of us who are hardcore, let's read the Bible. We are reading from Genesis chapter 20, verses 1 through the whole thing, and they sound like this. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the region of the Negeb and settled between Kadesh and Shur. While residing in Gerar as an alien, Abraham said of his wife Sarah, she is my sister. And King Abimelech of Gerar sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, you are about to die because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a married woman. Now Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, Lord, will you destroy an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, she is my sister? And she herself said, he is my brother. I did this in the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands. Then God said to him in the dream, yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart. Furthermore, it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all that are yours. So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told them all these things, and the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, what have you done to us? How have I sinned against you that you have brought such great guilt on me and my kingdom? You have done things to me that ought not be done. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what were you thinking that you did this thing? Abraham said, I did it because I thought, surely there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, this is the kindness you must do me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother. Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham and restored his wife Sarah to him. Abimelech said, my land is before you. Settle where it pleases you. To Sarah he said, look, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is your exoneration before all who are with you. You are completely vindicated. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and also healed his wife and female slaves, so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed fast all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Okay, where do we start here? Let's start with Abimelech, the name Abimelech. All right. As we have talked about before, Abraham, Ab means father. Rahem is similar to multitudes. So Abraham, father of multitudes. Abimelech has the same Ab, A-B, father, but Melech is like king, like royalty. So he's kind of the father king. So that's the meaning of his name. I don't know how much bearing it has, but it kind of clues us into this guy probably is like a stand-in character for this story. It's such a generic name that it's unlikely that he lived, or if this was an actual historical figure, this was probably a title that he gave himself, not his given name, so that he could be seen as in charge of this whole area. Secondly, there's a couple of interesting firsts in this particular story. One is this is the only time in the entire Bible when Abraham is called a prophet. And that's the language that is described. He is my prophet, and in the dream that Abimelech dreams, and it kind of matters because in the end of the story he stands in as a mediator between God and Abimelech. Even though Abraham is kind of like the villain in the story, he's the one who kind of gets it wrong, and Abimelech is the hero. Abimelech is the one that has to like deal with his problem. So Abimelech protagonist, Abraham antagonist, and yet Abraham remains in the office of prophet, the professor, if you will. And at the end, he's the one who has to ask God for healing. Also, another first is Sarah is his sister. Sarah is the sister of Abraham, half sister technically, but like that's the only time in the Bible where it mentions it. And for some reason, it's part of this story. All of that leads me to believe that this story probably existed before the writer actually wrote it down. And it's also very similar to Genesis chapter 12. They have a similar thing in Egypt where they pretend to be brother and sister instead of married husband and wife. And it's probably originating from the similar source, a same story that throughout the ages branched off into a couple of different iterations, and then the writer of Genesis kind of fit them both in different places to kind of like give people things that they were familiar with. People who were familiar with these stories being told from generation to generation, they want to see the story, but we've put our forefather, our ancestor, our prophet dude in the center of the story in order to make sense of it and to teach us something about how God works and who God is. So let's talk about probably the most upsetting part of this. Well, maybe the sister part is the most upsetting. One of the most upsetting parts of this, where Abraham's just like, yeah, take my wife. Have her. Go ahead, marry her, and you do what you want with her. It sounds ridiculous and it sounds horrible, and it also makes us not like Abimelech very much. But that's all of modern day thinking. That's kind of a context that wasn't really present in the past. And here's what I mean. You got to remember that Sarah is like 90-something years old at this point, and she's unmarried, has no children, and is traveling with her brother. So Abimelech is like, he's not trying to get laid here. He's not trying to have sex with her. He's doing Abraham and Sarah a favor. He is the king of the land, and he says to this 90-year-old barren, unmarried woman in thousands and thousands of years ago, he says, hey, you know what? Why don't you come under my house? I will take care of you. I will marry you. You will be taken care of by someone with wealth and prosperity and the ability to actually take care of you. This is actually a generous, noble thing that Abimelech is doing, and that kind of gets lost because our modern day understanding of that takes her agency completely out of the scenario. And yeah, that was kind of unfortunately a given in these ancient stories and this ancient context. The idea that he is bringing her under his household is actually a generous, kind, loving thing to do, not something horrible and terrible and nefarious. So given all these things, what is the actual point of this story? I think the point of this story really revolves around the statement from Abraham where he says, I just didn't expect you all to be good. I thought there is no fear of God in this land or in this people, and so I lied. I was afraid. I thought you would take advantage of us. I thought you would be mean to us, and so I lied. Abraham did not believe that God was at work in other people who are different, people from different cultures, people from different geography, people with different faiths. Abraham didn't believe that God was at work in foreigners. And despite the fact that he is actually the alien in the land, he is the foreigner. And he didn't believe that God was going to be at work there. And the surprise to the readers of this story originally would be that God actually is more at work in Abimelech than he is in Abraham. God is like talking directly to Abimelech in his dreams about what is important to do, what is good to do, what is right. And Abimelech turns out to be a kind, generous host who gives generously to the foreigner and the alien in the land. And again, this ties back to all of the other, please go look at the other Genesis videos that I've been doing. This is a theme about the alien in the land. How do we treat the foreigner? How are we supposed to treat the people who are other than us? Are they other, or are they just another version of us? The Bible insists that the other is us. There is no us and them. There's just us. And that's the point of this story. Every time we start to other something, every time we start to think that someone else is different and radically different and bad and worse, and God can't possibly be at work in their life, they're not the same as me. The Bible comes in to insist that the opposite is true. They absolutely are. There is no them. There is only us. That's what this story's about. So, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.